How is everybody? So today we're doing Uranus in the 11th house. And next week is Neptune is our last week with Pisces. So if there's any questions, anything that I've covered that you want clarity around, please let me know now or obviously by next week so I can address any level 1 questions in time. So talk about Uranus. When we first started in March, I was talking to you about Age of Aqaurius. And Uranus is the planet that's dictating everything right now that's happening in the world. Okay, so let me just share the screen. So you guys have a remember of what it looks like. So this is it. So I'm wearing the color blue. It's linked to the 5th chakra. I'll explain why in a minute from a psychological perspective. And it's this planet right here. So the Age of Aquarius is obviously Aquarius, and the planet that rules Aquarius is Uranus. And what happens is Uranus is uncertain. It's flashes of intuition. It's the new age. It has no roots. It is fun. It is impulsive. It's intuitive. It's youthful. So this is the energy. But one of the problems with this particular archetype is that it has no roots. So in the mythology, Uranus was castrated. And here's his little testicle by his son, Saturn. So what happened? The Uranus is the sky god. So when we talk about the Akashic records, when we talk about quantum physics, when we talk about energy field, when we talk about God, we're talking about this energy that pervades everything. And we now know in science that this exists, that there is an energetic field that pervades everything. If you look at the sky, unless it's like when it meets the horizon and things like that, it's detached. And that is the word of Uranus. Detached, detached, detached. So we're moving into this era where people are detaching from their friends, from their family, from reality, from their bodies. Nervous system is ruled by Uranus. Trauma, the words that we see all over, spread everywhere, linked to this era that we're living in. The end goal, which I don't think any of us are going to see in this incarnation, is a detachment from what Buddha said, the suffering. The root of all suffering is the thoughts, and that all suffering is linked to attachment. So we're not living this current way, right? We're in shambles. So a lot of the stuff that's out there now on nervous system, or people not feeling safe, not having inner safety, psychological safety, roots. Obviously everybody's intuitive and psychic, and that's what this is bringing up. But it's a planet that is cold. It is a planet that is detached. And that's what we're experiencing. So when we talk about masks, when we talk about being hidden in our houses for 2 years, when we talk about the internet, which is all ruled, internet, airwaves, sky, flights, things like that, all of that is the domain of Uranus. It's sky, it's detached. There's no roots, there's no earth. So it's the 5th chakra. So besides being the 5th chakra where we speak and truth and so forth, the 5th chakra in my model is before conception. It's wanting to go beyond conception. Before you have been conceived, your 4th chakra, there was nothing. You were one with the universe. You were with the sky god. You were in the universal consciousness. That is at a high vibration, the concept of Uranus. We're living it all wrong because everybody wants to be alien and reptile and starseed and earth angel and not human. as if before conception, they were special or whatnot. And now in an incarnation, they cannot accept their humanness. Okay, because there's not an attachment to the body. There's not an attachment to the form. There's a rejection of the form. And so it's the fifth chakra, not only from the ether, because it's the element of the ether, but it's also because it's before I conceived, before I was conceived, before I was even a thought. This unity with God, with the divine, with the universal consciousness is what I want to be attached to. So this is the rebel archetype at a high vibration. At a low vibration, it is chaos. And I think everybody could agree if that we had to name one word that is happening in the world right now, it's chaos. So there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no truth, it's just chaos, it's detachment, it is a complete destruction of things. Of course, right now, Pluto and Uranus are working together, but when you're trying to preconceive, when you're trying to go before something even started, obviously all things are destroyed because the golden era or the Sattva Yuga is getting ready to emerge. Again, I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime, but we're clearing out kind of like to start fresh. So this morning on my way home from the beach, I saw a rainbow. And the rainbow is a symbol of hope, of new beginnings. It's linked to the Noah's Ark story. And the Noah's Ark story, when, you know, two of each kind of animal, when the ark stops, these doves kept being sent out, and finally it was an indication when the rainbow appeared that there was a new beginning. And the Rainbow Bridge is actually Chiron. There's a book called The Rainbow Bridge. Chiron is the Rainbow Bridge. And so what happens is that Uranus, and we'll talk about the castration in a minute, when you come out of the universal consciousness through the through the Rainbow Bridge of Chiron, everybody has a wound at conception. Conception is everything. And the one thought you have at conception will be found in every single conflict, story, problem on any scale from 1 to 10. Doesn't matter what was happening on conception. What you know is that you're human, that you're wounded, that you're dissociated from your body, that you weren't loved, all the things that we've talked about. So the Rainbow Bridge here, Chiron, the Jesus story, being human, Hephaestus, Chiron, all of the myths that we've covered about being in the body. That's why people don't want to be human, and they're making these subcategories, is that they're trying to go up, so to speak, the rainbow and go back before conception, before creation. So there's a lot of emphasis now on, of course, thoughts and belief systems and things like that, because we're trying to go in terms of our evolution to the belief or to what is happening before, so that we don't suffer so much in the body. But these two archetypes are very closely related. Uranus is the sky god. And like every other god, he was told he was going to get dethroned, just like Saturn. So Saturn was told he was going to get dethroned, and Uranus said he was going to get dethroned. So Uranus, sky, is married to Gaia, earth. Right. So between heaven and earth is your entire existence. Pretty much your fifth chakra to your first chakra. So if you've seen the symbol of the tree of life in Kabbalah, you've seen the chakra system, if you've seen the tree, I use all these symbols in the shaman, it's all from your throat chakra to your first chakra. That's heaven and earth. That's your entire existence. And what happened is that he kept swallowing his children because he didn't want to get dethroned. The reason that the 6th and the 7th chakra are not involved is because this is balance, and this is considered more divine in terms of a transcendent experience, but they're few and far between. They're not really in the body. This is the real throne. If we figure this out, then we'll all be here. But really, we're all stuck here, okay, in our body representing the chakras or the planets or the archetypes. So he's told he was going to get dethroned, and he tells Gaia, give me, every time that a child was born, he would shove the kid into the earth. The earth holds all of it. The bloodshed, the tears, the crying, the babies that die, the war, all of it. Everything happening at the earth level is related to what is happening at the sky level or the universe level. This is a law called the law of correspondence. As above, so below. The nonsense and chaos in our earth has trickled down from lifetime after lifetime, century after century. This is not new. This is the oldest story ever. This is the way we are living it out, and this is our reality now. But this starts at the universal consciousness, and it goes down the planes of the universe, even though there's technically no hierarchy, just for example's sake, in a hierarchical way. And we find it now in Earth. So every single thing that's happening in Earth is a result of the chaos from the universal consciousness, from spiritual nonsense. And now this is what we're eating for dinner. Okay, so we are all guilty. We are all participants in every single thing that is happening on our Earth. And it comes from all of the chaos. It comes from things that we've said. It comes from things that we've thought. And then it trickles down, just like it trickles down into our body and turns into problems. So this God, he tells his wife, nope, shoving the baby into the earth, shoving the baby into the earth. And what happens is Saturn over here says, I'm going to help my mom. This is a group of gods called the Titans. This is very important. The Titans are animals. They're beasts. It is low level consciousness. You are not in the body, and you are not in a form of Saturn, tied to time, tied to a flesh, because you are anything but a Titan, an animal. This concept of believing that everyone's so evolved and I'm so more, no, if you are here in a Chiron body that's wounded and in a Saturn flesh bound by time, you are a Titan, an absolute animal, low-level consciousness. There's no Olympians. And so Saturn comes, he gives his mother a purgative, and she starts to purge all of the kids, and the Titans come out. There's a scene in Percy Jackson in the first one. They're not really the Titans, but they're like these monster Titan looking. You just go to where his mom is taking him to the secret island where Chiron runs the school. I can maybe find the clip and send it to you. You see these, they're like 20 feet tall. They're huge animals. We're talking reptilian brain. We are talking fight or flight. We are talking brute strength. There is no intelligence here. We are animals. And if we are in this flesh, and if we are wounded, and if we have karma, and everything we covered in Chiron and Saturn, it's because we did something to earn this existence. We are not here to save the planet, save the world, raise a vibration, and all the nonsense that is being sold to people on the internet about this existence of the Age of Aquarius. If we can get out of our own way, and we can actually evolve into a higher consciousness being, meeting our own needs, taking care of ourselves, stuff that we'll cover about Uranus, then maybe we can serve another and the planet is to move forward, because this is so detached that we have to learn heaven and earth to get together. And right now we're just in a complete detachment, everyone individual, everyone for themselves, everyone isolated. And that is never going to move the world forward to the higher states of consciousness that are the states of consciousness for Uranus. The levels of consciousness for Uranus, if you look at your video and your sheet, are man and woman that are asleep, man and woman that are awake, man and woman that are aware, and man and woman that have transmuted consciousness. This is where we're at. And everyone's asleep. So this idea that everyone's so woke, it's nonsense. So anyway, these Titans come and Saturn goes and he castrates Uranus's testicle. That testicle falls into the ocean. We covered that in Venus, and Aphrodite is birthed. The thing that unites heaven and earth is love. First, it starts with Eros, desire, second chakra, love. You need to love your things, your desires, and all that. Then you're loving yourself. And then finally, Aphrodite Urania, that comes from this, is love of the other, agape love. If you Google agape love, you'll see divine love or love from God to people, to humans. It's love of another. The 11th house is the house of community, of teamwork, of groups. But the number one thing that happens in this problem here is that the minute there's an us and a them, the oxytocin shoots up in our brain. We're better than them, separation, group, no love. We're back in the second chakra. We're not living here. This is teamwork. This is vulnerability. This is compassion. This is tolerance. This is patience. I don't see that in the world. We are in our second chakra. We are in deep, deep Eros desire, Aphrodite pandemos. Our job as humans in the age of Aquarius to evolve as man and woman that transcend beyond self-awareness. That's why my first book is Beyond Self-Awareness, is so that we can be together as a humanity. This word is also humanity, one of the key words for Uranus, the 11th house. Any questions so far? So why the castration? And why is it important to link it to Chiron and to Saturn? Well, Saturn is who castrated him. Saturn is the sage archetype. So let me just bring up my archetypal map. And for those of you, I know Nicole works in this work, but for those of you who see clients, this is going to be probably the primary issue with 99.999% of people. And my spiritual adulting book, I talk about this at length. The fight between Saturn and Uranus. Uranus keywords are chaos, rebel, independent, freedom. Saturn keywords are rigid, limits, discipline, consistency. I had never heard this term before, but a few months ago, someone said about this whole COVID and politics nonsense, you either want safety or you want freedom. And I was like, oh my God, that's the sentence. You either want freedom or you want safety. Saturn is rigid, it's certain, it's a timeline, you know what you're getting, 2 + 2. Uranus, you want freedom, the chaos, I want to be my own boss. No camp is gonna win, it's nonsense. It's the midpoint. So most people's psyche are set up to not be dissociated from their body. Nervous system issues is all Uranus, preconception, they don't want to be in the body, or safety, structure, certainty, control, rigidity. You get so boxed into your life that you blow it up with the chaos of Uranus. Once you blow it up, you gotta come back into the flesh and do what the world tells you gotta do. You gotta go to work, you gotta pay your bills, you gotta wipe your ass. Like, you're not getting out of this fight in this lifetime. You gotta be dead. It's not gonna happen. So your job in your psyche, so that you could be in your 6th chakra, is to find the midpoint between the rebel and the sage. That's the high vibration of this relationship in the heavens that now has trickled down here. We're living it. You have to have your boundaries. You have to put your parameters. You have to live in the world. You have to eat. And within there, give yourself some flexibility, some freedom. And we're seeing this. We're seeing this with the Facebook changing its name to Meta, and everyone works from home and everyone has freedom, but you still got to work. And everybody went remote, but they had you on camera and they had you clocking a clock. So you were free, but were you really? So you start to see this is like the ruler of the day. All this nervous system trauma stuff is all Uranus. The more anxiety, the more ADD, the more shakes, anything to do with the nervous system is going to be related to Uranus. We're going to see more illnesses linked to that. We're also going to see more ways of healing that are energetic based, frequency based, law of vibration based, because that's the positive part of the story. But it all happens in the body. The body, the time, the consistency, the daily, the schedule. You got to wake up, you got to eat, you got to sleep, you got to go to the bathroom. You cannot get past that. I don't care how evolved you think you are. So that is the castration of Uranus. So everybody feels castrated with a boss, with a spouse, with a paycheck, with a vacation schedule or lack thereof. And you cannot escape this life with those things. I don't care how rich you are, how privileged you are. You still have to eat, drink, and go to the bathroom. So this relationship is supremely important in our psyche. And you're going to find people on one extreme or the other. And then, of course, they have to make room for the other archetype, because you cannot live in a rigidity, discipline, control, and not do something over here. And you can't be all, and then something not force you into some limitation. So this is the war of all the wars. This is the mythological war of all the wars. Uranus, Saturn, freedom, rebel, chaos, sage, limitation, castration. This is also the relationship between why grandparents and grandchildren feel good together versus parents and their children. Because parents and their children are always worried that they're going to get castrated or have been castrated. Whereas Uranus is redeemed by Jupiter because he now takes the proper place that belonged to his grandfather. So this is a concept in psychology called generativity. Forget about the kids. Your kids have to deal with the fact that they can't stand you and they don't want to be you. But your grandchildren continue your lineage through this relationship here. So why Chiron? Chiron being the rainbow bridge between Uranus and Saturn. The way it's set up in the heavens, and I'm not an astronomy like genius or anything, but the way that it's located is between Saturn and Uranus is Chiron. That's why it's considered the rainbow bridge. So in order to bridge in your chart, in your psyche, Uranus and Saturn, you need to work your Chiron. They work together. Any questions? That's your wound, that's your trauma, that's your conception, that's your humanness, that's your third chakra, that's your animal nature, everything we covered in Virgo. Any questions?
This might be pretty existential.
I love
this
an existential question.
But this is an existential topic. You know, this whole conflict between freedom and safety. I'm involved in a group and a team right now, and this is very much like highly present on a particular issue where I live. Like, what's the resolution point? Because in my experience, when we've tried to come to a common place of understanding, it just seems like impossible. And like this quote unquote war is not finished. There's like this whole state ballot process and all sorts of things that are going to happen. But like, there's also not a full level playing field, right? When you talk about the voice of the people and the community, and then like you have like people with lots of money. Like, how do you see this resolving itself? And like, what can the average person do to like help advocate for this midpoint, but still it feels like inevitably getting caught up in one or the other sides?
There is no resolution. There is no resolution. The resolution is the human experience. The resolution is the Chiron, is the wound, is recognition that you are that other. You, by law, by earthly law, right here in Saturn, you must pick a side. You cannot live in that gray, in that uncertainty, in that incongruence all the time. That'll rip you apart. Yes, there's a spiritual existential piece where that's appropriate. But in your day-to-day life, in the earthly world, Saturn, you got to have rules around the 5 areas of the earthly life, right? You write your rules, you have your policies, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, whatever it is, that's the way you live. And you have to identify that with your values. And that's the way you live, and that's your conviction. But that's the boundary. That's like the box. The freedom comes through that inner safety of you having this boundary. So I just had a client and I'm like, it's all made up. I said, pick a safety for your health. She's like, I'm going to eat an apple twice a week. Great. I don't care. Eat an apple, eat a gummy bear. Doesn't matter. Just do it. It's integrity. It's inner safety. It's showing up for yourself. It's keeping your word. It's seeking your own needs to be met by yourself, not by others. That's the only resolution. It is a personal, individual. We all have a human existence. I don't take your power. You don't take mine. We meet here. We meet in the liminal space of the human consciousness and the animal consciousness. We're all dead. We all have deadly sins and vices and desires. And we can love each other, love thy neighbor as thyself here, because we've owned that lower nature. That's why it's the Rainbow Bridge, but there's no resolution. Your human experience, your 80, 90 years on the planet, that's the resolution. That's why in the end of life, how did I do? What did I do? Did I violate? Did I betray myself? Was I bitter and resentful? That's it. That's the bill you're past.
So if part of my rule and my integrity is that I follow spiritual law as primary over earthly law, and I break earthly law in that process,
you have to be comfortable with the consequences of breaking earthly law.
Okay.
You will get past the buck with Saturn. You will absolutely have to pay earthly law. You don't pay your taxes 10 years, something's going to happen. You shoplift 8 times, on the 9th you get caught. I had a girl the other day, I shoplifted 20 times and this time I got caught. I said, earthly law, you eventually get caught. Universal law, it's every time. So you have to make the rules of your earthly life safe for you and accept the consequences. Saturn's going to pass the buck here. You're not getting off scot-free. Maybe you pay because you're rich and privileged and eventually something happens and maybe it's not fair in the earthly world. But this law is fair for everybody. If you're in existence in this body, you are the same. I don't care what political affiliation, how much money I have, your gender, where you live. It does not matter. You are here, Rainbow Bridge, because of this. It's equal. Now, I'm no one to say that this is better than that, but that's what people say. Oh, they have it better. How do you know? How do you know what that person is struggling with? Part of the teaching is, if you're in this flesh, you're struggling with the same nonsense. Your desires, your self-worth, and learning to love another. Second, third, and fourth chakra. Because that's the shared human experience. So you choose your earthly law, and if you break the law, you get caught your consequences. Because Saturn said, oh, you ate that, you bought that for breakfast, here's your dinner. That's why there's no victim. And everybody lives out this cosmic story. But that's why it's preconception. What happens preconception when we're all hunky-dory in the universal consciousness, in the universal womb, in the universal playground, in the big ass cookie dough? We all have karma. All of us. You did, I did, we said, she said, all of us. So that cookie dough gets castrated by karmic taskmaster Saturn over here and gives you this body, Chiron, the Rainbow Bridge, that through the body, you have to work all of it. Nobody in a body gets off scot-free. I don't care how much money you have in your bank. I don't care how happy you seem on Instagram. It's a nonsense. But in terms of your earthly choices, that's on you. You pick your consequence and be mad about it or not. That's an earthly decision. That's not. But the spiritual law equally shelled out to everybody. And people don't like to hear that. You get one thread of karma. One. It is equally shelled out to everybody. At the moment of conception, the fate clotho comes and weaves your fate. It may look different to everybody, but internally it's equal. If we could get that understanding, then maybe the earthly stuff could be a little bit more tolerable. And again, it doesn't mean that there aren't groups in the earthly world. I'm not saying that in the earthly world, differences and things don't, but I'm talking about internally. This is an inner war that we are having. Inner safety, inner freedom does not exist outside of self. It is the law, as within, so without, as above, so below. Whatever you did over here, hunky-dory karma hanging out with all your peeps, you get over here when you incarnate. And Chiron is the biggest wound, the primordial wound. Everybody shares worthlessness, rejection, abandonment, everybody. It's universal. This is there is no, that is why it's the age of Aquarius. It is universal. The more people want to be separate and different and special, the less we're going to achieve this. That's Saturn. Saturn loves to be special and ambitious and on top of the tower. Not Uranus. And then you can't go the other extreme of being totally ambivalent and totally detached and cold and mean, because then that's the other side of the coin. So it's that meeting. It's the third chakra meeting of Chiron, where the liminal space of the human consciousness and the animal consciousness come together. And we realize this is all made up. Make up your rules as you feel safe in the earthly world, but the internal space is equal for all of us. We have all been castrated. We have all been kicked out of heaven. We've been all kicked out of the Garden of Eden, whatever story you like. That's the castration of the testicle. And the shortcut is love, tolerance, patience. You want to know the shortcut? Find your Venus. If not, you got to play out every archetype. That's just the way it is. Questions? This is not what I expected today. I was all zen and stuff, and Uranus is like, no. Use that throat chakra. And I'm never late. Timeliness, I'm OCD with time. I was actually a couple minutes late. Like I already had that rebel in me. Like, ah.
So Saturn Chiron, and Venus all point towards the work to be done in order to reach what Uranus is asking for, which is inner freedom.
Yeah, it's the Uranus, Chiron, Saturn. And Venus will sort of be the product of, right? Look at the similarities. You've got Uranus, Chiron, Saturn, right? If Chiron is the Rainbow Bridge, and then you've got three kinds of Venus or three kinds of love. You've got the Eros love or the Aphrodite Pendemis. You've got the self-love, your third chakra. And then you've got love of the other, the agape or the Aphrodite Urania, which is where that comes from. It's like the same layer. Where do we meet? Chiron, Venus, self-love, love of another. We create inner safety. We set boundaries. We're safe for ourselves. We can be safe for another. So there's a reason that there's like that triplicity there. So it doesn't matter which way you look at it, you're going to reach the same conclusion. But the Rainbow Bridge is this. But if you understand metaphysically that you are not a victim, that you created all the nonsense that you have in your life, and you do not need to believe in past lives, it's easier. Most people believe in karma, cause and effect. Energy can't be created or destroyed. So there's some version of karma that they can buy into. So if you did XYZ in your last life, or when you were in heaven, you know, you're in a holding ground, and now you're back in the body, and this is what you ate for dinner. This lifetime is what you're eating for dinner. When you were in Uranus in the heaven, that's what you bought at Publix from your previous existence, however you look at it. Then you can realize that everybody's human experience is shared. And everyone struggles with worthlessness, fear of abandonment, rejection, exile, all of the Chiron mythology, every single person. And the only antidote is love. First self-love, then you can love another, which is service, another word for Uranus. So you can look at Uranus, Venus. You can look at Uranus, Saturn with Chiron in the middle. I mean, you can look at it different ways. That's the beauty of the chart. You want to look at the interplay of the myths and the planets in your head. In level 2, when we do aspects, that's going to help. You have a hard aspect between Uranus and Saturn. Well, that right there is how you're going to live it out. If you have a really nice aspect between Uranus and Venus, that's not going to be hard, but the other will be harder. And the one that's square or quincunx or opposite are going to be the difficult ones. So that will layer in our next level. But that's why nothing is piecemeal, nothing's isolated. You have to understand the myth and the holistic nature of the psyche of the human being. And these are psychological organs, just like our physical organs. Everybody's got a kidney, lungs, everybody has those same organs. That's a shared human experience, just like the psychological organs. And how you live it out, better healthcare or a little less passive aggressive, is on you. That's the earthly stuff. But we aren't different. But if we continue the separateness and specialness, this place is going down fast. So in the levels of consciousness, let me just bring it up. Men and women that are asleep, men and women that are awake. Notice how that is the low level consciousness, the stone and the water. Awake. There goes your woke. What are you so woke of? Until you begin self-awareness and you bring it back to self, that you created, that you're the issue, that you cannot possibly transmute consciousness, and you possibly cannot serve another. In the Hercules myth, Hercules is told that he has to clean the stables, the Augean stables. King Augeas had not cleaned his stables for 30 years. The stench of the horse shit was killing the commoners in the land. And he goes to King Augeas and he's like, I'm going to clean the stables. And Augeas is like, why? What do you want from me? Because we're skeptical, because people don't serve others. That's a nonsense. No one serves anyone. You're just thinking of self. No one's awake. So he's like, I just want to clean the stables. And he's like, no. And then he's like, fine, I'll give you half of my kingdom. Like trying to negotiate so he could get ahead of the screw over, right? Like think about it. How are we always ahead of the screw over? And Hercules, I don't want your kingdom. I just want to clean your stables. So finally, Augeas is like, okay, sure. So Hercules has a flash of intuition. One of the words of Uranus, that's why everybody's psychic now, is intuition. And he sees that there are two rivers, that if he cuts holes in the stable, the rivers will come and push out all the shit. And he does. And the rivers come clean it out, and Augeas comes and says, that's a shortcut, and you didn't really do it, and like couldn't accept the service that he took care of the problem. So it's a new way of looking at things, right? Where it's not the earthly sort of Saturnian pay, and we're seeing that in the way that people live and schedules, like Jen always says, jobs that haven't even been created yet. Like that's what part of this is. So it's a different way, obviously working smarter, not harder. That's part of this. It's also teamwork, but at the root, it's the water. The water is the element of humanity. It's emotion, how we manipulate with, how we try to clean our dirty thoughts with water. We purify our bodies and have man cleanses and food cleanses and all this nonsense just to dirty it up again. The nonsense. But the symbol of water, which is all over the earth, which will tie into next week of Pisces and the Neptune and the oceans, is that that's the womb. You get conceived, and the shared experience is that everybody had a womb experience. And all the nonsense we covered in that womb, and we'll do more of that next week. But the teamwork, and so Uranus or Ganymede, who is the god, he's not a god, but the guy in the heavens that Zeus put up there, is called the water bearer. Aquarius is an air sign, but he's called the water bearer. Because if I can give you to drink, you could give me to drink. And until we learn that, nobody's woke. Surely not woke, not self-aware. And so we have to come back to self. We have to come back to our intuition. We have to come back to Chiron in our third chakra. We have to come back to our animal nature. We have to come back to self so that maybe we can serve and then transmute. But this speaks to the different healing modalities, energy, frequency. You see how all of it is intertwined and why all these things are emerging. It's not weird, it's appropriate. But we're not at the level where we're just going to energetically, magically disappear illness. That may come later on. We're still fighting with the Saturn Uranus. The body still rules. The thoughts are not that evolved yet. That's what this hopefully 2,000-year period will do. So the idea of being woke is that you realize that all of this, let me take you back to the chart, is all made up. It's all universal consciousness. The castration is made up. The earth is made up. Everything in the earthly world dies. Hence what we covered last week. Saturn is death. And if it dies, it doesn't matter. but we have to honor that part in our life. We can't just be rebellious, chaos, freedom, you know, the nonsense. You have to find the midpoint, which is the body. So if we can just put some safe parameters so that we don't self-betray, like this girl, I'm gonna eat 2 apples a week or whatever she said, check, inner safety, inner child's happy, I did it, I'm free, okay, go. Because all of this dies, all of the earthly stuff dies, and all that's left is the universal consciousness. But as long as they're in a fight, there is no hope for balance here, none. And this is something that we have to evolve as a species. So it brings up a lot of the Mother Earth stuff. It brings up a lot of the pollution and you know, global warming and everything, because part of the Age of Aquarius is obviously the fight with Gaia. And he kept shoving and shoving and shoving and shoving. And how much can she hold? But she holds all of it. So you start to see why all of these things are happening. But it doesn't mean that because you know, your carbon footprint or stuff, you're so evolved. That's nonsense. But you start to see why in the psyche these things show up. These are threads that emerge because of the myths. It's all in the myth. Questions? Okay. Even though it's not level 2, I don't want to forget to say this. If in your chart, Uranus is next to anything, touching anything, it makes that thing unstable. So for instance, if Uranus is next to the moon, even a moon in Cancer, that's like a stable moon, home, mother, tradition, and Uranus is next to it, it's not stable. Nothing Uranus touches is stable. Think it has no roots. If it's next to the moon, if it's in the 6th, that's an unstable nervous system. That person's prone for like Parkinson's or ADD. If it's in the 3rd house, that person is not going to be able to concentrate in school. If it's in the 8th, they're going to be super intuitive, the flashes of intuition. So it is unstable. It's fast and furious. It's a very youthful energy. It's fun. It's exciting. It's detached, but it makes everything unstable. So I just didn't want to forget to say that. Uranus in the 1st. Uranus in the 1st, obviously the physical body is not stable. It could be central nervous system issues. It's going to be a personality that's very eccentric. Uranus in the 1st people, just like Uranus next to the sun, are eccentric. They don't follow the rules. They don't care about authority. They are chaos. They're like those people that have a wake and they just take it with them. There isn't like, it's such an individuality, not an individuation, big difference. That's another word of Uranus. Such an individuality, especially next to the sun, that it's like me, 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 me. The 2nd, if you have Uranus in the 2nd, you will not manage your money for nothing. You can make as much of it as you want, and it's going to go in one hand, and the minute that you make it, it's going to be out, 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 out. So even though Uranus isn't a self-worth planet, when you see Neptune in the 2nd, which we'll cover next week, no self-worth. That person has no self-worth. But Uranus in the 2nd, because the way you manage your 5 areas of life in the earthly world speak to your self-worth, if Uranus is in the 2nd, it could be a self-worth issue. However, unlike Neptune, Uranus in the 2nd, those people can make money in the oddest of ways that you wouldn't even think of. Like the eccentricity is like, that's how they make their money. But they won't know how to manage it. Remember, there's no roots. That's the key here. It's sky. There's no roots. You need Saturn to root you. So the house and relationship between Uranus and Saturn is going to tell you how those people find a way to live in the world. Uranus in the 3rd, ADD. Don't give your kid Ritalin. Look at their chart. ADD. You cannot sit still for 5 minutes when you have Uranus in the 3rd. Super smart, super bright, no focus. It's a tough one for kids in obviously K through 12. Uranus in the 4th is a very unstable placement. If the 4th is your inner space, it's unstable. So chaos is the way you feel safe. It's a very interesting conundrum. Uranus in the 4th is also going to be a very unstable home, or a home that has an eccentric theme. My daughter has this. She got divorced. We got divorced. She doesn't even remember ever having us live in the same home. I was married to a trans man, an eccentric type of childhood home. Very strange, our dynamic in how they shared in their schedule. So it creates chaos as safety because that was my childhood home. My childhood home was eccentric and chaotic and rebellious and non-traditional, another word for Uranus. Then that's what I'm going to create external. Remember, as within, so without. Wherever you have Uranus, you're going to live out law of correspondence because it speaks to the inner safety. But it's never safe. It's always chaotic. Uranus, wherever you have it. Uranus in the 5th, you can obviously have a child that's an Aquarius. You can have a child that's an absolute genius, because Aquarius is a sign of the genius. It could be that you've lost children, like let's say a bunch of miscarriages because you couldn't hold on. There was no roots to sort of bring them in. Uranus in the 5th is someone who most likely will not be able to have a job where they work for someone. The issue with authority and the individuation, or the individuality, I should say, is too strong. And so they can make living, they could be an entrepreneur with very, very unlikely means, like the 2nd house, just something atypical. But the likelihood of Uranus in the 2nd, the 5th, the 6th, or the 10th working for another person, they'd shoot themselves. Or they have to be their own boss, or they have to be the boss of the place, but really they don't even necessarily want to manage others. Uranus in the 6th, health issues. Whether it's nervousness, anxiety, trembling, panic attacks, that's going to be in the 6th. The work life is unstable. These are type of people that are constantly getting fired or change jobs or can't sit still in a job. Or they have to have a job, let's say like being a pilot, where they have to be in the air, or they have to be on the sky, you know, talking on the microphone or something, in order to live out that sense of expansion, of freedom, of the sky, of the airwaves, of no roots. I'm not here. Maybe they drive Uber or something like that, where they're in movement. Uranus in the 7th, the best way to manage a Uranus in the 7th is to tell the people, if they can't sleep in separate rooms, if they can't live in separate cities or separate houses, that they at least have separate spaces, like each of them have their own cave. You need to have a separation. It's a very, very hard placement to have Uranus in the 7th and make a long-term relationship last. There's too much I nature. And so if you're counseling a couple, you create an environment that supports the I. This is the I. And which is ironic because the whole goal is to get the team, but it's not. Uranus in the 8th is going to be someone very, very psychic. They might blow it off. They may not even believe. They might be, oh, I don't know, I saw this or whatever, but they're very, very intuitive and psychic. Now, Uranus type of intuition is quick, it's intuitive, it's a fast download. It's very different than a Pisces type of intuition that we'll talk about next week. It's just a flash. Everything to do with Uranus is fast, is quick, is unstable, it's uncertain. Did I really see that? Did I really hear that? My illness went away, like that kind of stuff. So the intuition is good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's lengthy or has longevity or has what's the word I'm looking for? Well, it has no roots, but that it has like a consistency. So like I said, the person may not even believe. I'm like, oh, I saw something, or oh, you should do that. And then it happens. They themselves are oftentimes even shocked because it's not something that they practice. It's not something that they have a skill around. It's just that they allowed the flash of intuition in, and you'll have intuition wherever you have Uranus or Aquarius. But it's not a developed skill like typically with something more Piscean or something, or even Scorpionic. It's more just flashes of intuition. I think of the lady who wrote Harry Potter, how she just saw it on the subway and like knew the whole story. That's the Uranus type of intuition. And you follow it, it's just different. It's not that subtle, consistent thing that you check in with yourself. Because remember, you're not attached to the body. Wherever you have Uranus, there's a complete detachment. So a consistent intuition is you trusting your gut. You know how your guidance talks to you. It's subtle, but it sounds like a roar when you really get it. This is just something fast that everybody has. Everybody. Uranus in the 9th, you're not going to believe in anything traditional in terms of philosophy and in terms of religion at all. This is going to be definitely someone more new agey, things that are non-traditional, energy medicine, things like that, quantum physics, astrology, that kind of stuff. Uranus also rules astrology. So I had said that the first day that we started class in March, one of the things with the Age of Aquarius and why astrology is on every street corner. I mean, Jen and I got a run-of-the-mill newsletter the other day, and the first article was on astrology. Like, it's everywhere now. So that's the also why it's Age of Aquarius. So people like on Uranus in the 9th are very good placements for astrologers or people that are attracted to these things. Uranus in the 10th, you can't work for someone. You have to be your own boss, or again, you could be a pilot or something that takes you off of the earth. Like, you're not going to work professionally, like in the earth. You need something that makes you feel detached. Maybe you're on the 200th floor of a building. So it depends on where the person is in the environment, of course, culturally or whatnot. But those people might want to work, 250th floor of a building to not feel that they're grounded on the floor. I see there's a question here. Oh, okay. Uranus in the 10th also, Uranus is all on instability. The 410 is going to be unstable father, mother. So Uranus in the 10th is an unstable mother. Most often with the sort of 410 now being mom and dad, you leave it to the person, but I pretty consistently still see 4 is dad and 10 is mom. And 4 is also just the home life. So like I said, with my daughter. Uranus in the 11th, friends that are eccentric, groups that you never feel really part of a group. You might plop into the group, but there's no roots, there's no real anchoring or tethering to something. That's another word for Uranus. There's no tether, there's no anchor. Eccentricity, of course, in my case, groups of intuition and people that are drawn to these themes. Uranus in the 12th makes the person's mental health very unstable. It's not a Saturn that you're going to have a depression or a melancholy or that darkness to you. First of all, intuition. Uranus at the 12th, you're going to be super psychic, but that psychic could be a schizophrenia type of thing or one of those spiritual emergency things, and you just don't have an explanation for because you never really feel that you anchor in. So it could be a very difficult placement. It would be managed healthily with some sort of spiritual guidance and understanding and development of skills and a consistent practice. Dreams, those people are going to dream like crazy. Uranus in the 12th. And it's just going to make, there may not be like logical explanations for things. weird shit happens, and it's Uranus in the 12th kind of thing. So there's like an eccentricity to those parts of life that already escape us, that already don't have clarity, and now all of a sudden this thing. So the Uranus placement, it has a lot to do obviously with the aspects too, but in general, it's just going to be a very unstable house. So if that's your subconscious and Uranus is in there, besides the psyche and the spiritual sort of intuitive nature of it, it can make the psyche very, very unstable. And then of course you feel in the earthly world unstable because Uranus doesn't like you. Any questions? So let's look at some charts. Where, oh, Jen in the 9th. Okay, so that makes sense. This is also traveling, right? The wanting to be in the air all the time kind of thing with Uranus in the 9th. The yoga, the Ayurveda, the metaphysics school. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's a very normal placement. Now, this is a generational planet. Uranus is in a sign for 7 years. So it's going to be for 7 years, a generation is going to have the same sign. You're not going to ever see a Uranus. Well, you're not going to not see it. I guess if you have an older client that's 84. A Uranus conjunction doesn't happen until you're 84. The main thing, and we'll cover this in level 2, is going to be the Uranus opposition. So what happens between 40 and 42 is that we create some chaos. Whatever we anchored in with Saturn at 28 to 30, remember I told you that first Saturn return, Uranus is like, I'm chained in, get me the hell out of here. So give or take a couple years, that's about the time where the person starts to brew, and I got to get out of this, I got to get out of this, I got to get out of this. Chaos, blow up your life, whatever you were confined to at 28 to 30. It really starts really at 7, and 14 is the biggie. But those Saturn cycles make you feel chained. So that's another thing to look at, is the relationship between the chain of the 5th house Saturn, that I need freedom through the 9th from travel. You can start to see the relationship on how we live that. But that's going to be a very common time where people come to astrology. They have no clue how to identify what they're feeling. They don't have words for the brewing in their psyche, that they want to blow everything up and have no responsibility and just throw everything away. But eventually, once that subsides, Saturn kicks in again, because remember I told you Saturn's a consistency, and you're going to be found maybe a new husband, a new mortgage, a new job, but you're going to have those things. That's just the way it is. So it makes that house fun. It makes it, in this case, in Jen's case, you know, the spirituality and stuff like that makes a lot of sense. Also look at the cusp of Aquarius. So hers is here, the cusp of the 2nd. So don't forget to look at the cusp and the house where the planet is for the myth, for the meaning. It's not just the planet. Sharon. Ooh, I forgot to mention this. Uranus in the 8th. A very sexual placement. Uranus in the 8th is very open-minded about sexuality. So tantra, you know, different whatever is popular, things that are just open-minded. Obviously, the person's going to decide, and that Saturn's going to help. With the Saturn in Virgo, this isn't going to be like, you know, free for all, but it allows for some exploration, maybe with a partner, things like that, because it's in the 8th house. And then she's a Pisces with a Uranus in the 8th. I mean, and a Scorpio ascendant, the intuition's got to be rock solid, and a 4th house sun, which is so centered in self. So that's something, if you have not developed, that you definitely want to develop with your chart, is paying attention to your psychic nature and your intuitive nature. And they're flashes, they come like flashes, but pay attention. So Uranus in the 8th also, because the 8th is and this could explain Dan's death, and that's why I'm going to say this. you have to take the whole chart into account. In transits, you're seeing what's happening. But if Uranus is transiting an 8th, or Uranus is in the 8th natally, if you're in business, the 8th house is business partnerships, business relationships. One business relationship is a marriage. And Uranus is in there, and some planet comes in and just makes it unstable. And the 8th house is death, sudden loss financially. You start to phrase it. It's more about a transit than a Uranus in the 8th as a natal placement, but it could be a sudden death of someone. You may not know that it's your husband, but it could be that you say, oh, you're going to have a sudden loss or a sudden shift in someone that you share resources, financial resources, or sex with. So it would make sense. And we might want to look back at another time and see what was transiting specifically in the 8th when Dan died, because it speaks to the sudden nature. Uranus gives you no warning. So in transiting, if you're playing around with your chart and you have Uranus, wherever you have Uranus, you have absolutely no warning. Something is coming. You don't know if it's good. You don't know if it's bad. You don't know anything. You just know that you're going to be like, what? So when it's natal in a house so important like the 8th, it could start to make sense as to the story. And Nicole in the 2nd. So what I said about the money. So having a framework around the money linked because of self-worth more than just the fact of money. You can make ways like you do, you make it in eccentric ways and in the stuff that you do, very, Age of Aquarius ways. But you want to make sure from a self-worth perspective that it's not just seeping out. If you think of Uranus as having a gash in your chakra, it's just spewing out. There's no container. Well, you don't want that in your money house. You don't want that in wherever you have that. But that's how it lives, because it wants freedom. It wants to be released. And so it feels very confined and constricting with where you have Saturn. But when you can make friends with those two, especially if you're lucky enough to have a trine or something in your chart, then you're already ahead of the game. But think of it like a gash where the energy is just kind of spewing out. I don't want a container. I don't want to be attached to anything. Uranus in your chart, no matter where it is also the ability for you to get out of your own way. It's where you can call BS on yourself about that part of the chart. So you can say, oh, this is just a thought. This is nonsense. Intuitively, you can get out of your way. Where Saturn, you're not getting out of your way. Can we look at, yeah, of course. Okay, so Abby has it on her 1st. Okay, so this is a big time 1st house. This ain't no joke. If the ruler of the chart is the black moon that we've already talked about me, talk about the self-destruction of self, talk about the body stuff that the black moon has. Neptune is going to be a self-worth issue, which we'll talk about next week. And then you've got Uranus. There's an issue with the actual form. There's the issue with the actual physical nature of life, of the flesh, of the body, of the personality. Uranus, black moon together, by the way, if you happen to see that in a chart, conjunct, Uranus, black moon conjunction is the most sexual placement there is. Not because it's sex, I mean, even though they're both very sexual placements, it's a feeling of how do I get in the body? How do I get some physicality that I'm here? Because remember, Uranus is the heavens and black moon is exiled. So in order to get here, I've got to find a way to find some connection. So this is an intense 1st house and everything's retrograde. But Uranus in the 1st is going to make you very eccentric, But if you don't want to be in the body and you already have black moon stuff and Neptune, that's a heavy first house. That's a very, very heavy first house. So there's a lot of self stuff that we've got to get through before I can even begin to offer to another person or to see life from something other than my issue, my physicality. This could also be a little detached in the sense of just detached from reality because it's Uranus and with the black moon there. So both of these are detached in their own way. Uranus because she wanted to be in, I mean, black moon because she wanted to be in exile, and Uranus because it's the sky. Now, the energy, the sexual energy, the sex appeal of a Uranus black moon in the first is gonna be someone very sexual, very attractive, someone with a seductress type of tendency, just from a physical standpoint, because it's the first house, it's the physical body. An eccentricity, maybe an indifference to certain things. And then you see this is Capricorn and this is Uranus. And this is a generational thing. These kids have, most of them have 2 to 3 planets in Sagittarius. She has 2 in Sag, then has the Capricorn, then the Uranus. This is a major war. This is Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. This generation is living out this entire cosmic war in their head. And then they're living it out in that part of their chart. And that's a generational thing, the 1999 to 2001 group. That's the other thing why you start to see that people have similarities, but in different ways. So if she's living out this kind of war in her psyche and in her body, then that's something to address. How do you make friends with these these the big three in your head in terms of the gods, big three, not some lunatic. That's an interesting first house, very interesting. It's on the cusp of the second. Anything that is touching the cusp that close is meant to be in both. And on top of that, the second house is ruled by Aquarius. So not only mismanagement of money, but also eccentric ways of making money. And Jennifer, you have that too. So again, you could start seeing that, the lineage piece. Any other, did I miss anyone? I think I got everybody. Any other questions? Okay. So look at your Uranus, look at your Saturn, look at your Chiron. See how you can get those 3 to be friends. Be here in the body now, learn some tolerance, some patience, clean your stables, help the other guy clean his. This is what we're here for, people. This ain't going away. But this is the war that we're seeing on Earth that started in the heavens. Okay, oh, it's just us. Okay. Adieu.